Well, I think we're going to try to attempt here 2006 Hyundai Sonata GLS 2.4 liter dual overhead cam timing chain engine. Getting in and doing the timing chain. I've taken the wheel off, 5 21 millimeter lug nuts. You just break them loose on the ground and then jack it up and secure the vehicle in some form or fashion so it does not fall down on you. We have a cover or two, 10 millimeter bolts, 3 of them holding a cover on there. This cover right here, and then this cover right here also has a bunch of 10 millimeter bolts and a couple of Phillips plastic screws which may or may not come out, and you might just have to bust them out if they don't behave. That's just the way it is with those plastic pieces. I got my 15 millimeter wrench on the timing. Got my 15 millimeter wrench on the serpentine belt. I'm going to just go this way. And we can take the belt off. Hope you can see the belt is slacking. And this video could be for remove and replace serpentine belt as well. Trying to show you the way it goes. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and pull this wrench to the right, again 15 millimeter, and give some slack and take the belt off, probably at that pulley right there. Although my wrench is now stuck there, so we might have to decide where you're going to grab it so you don't get your wrench stuck. Pretty close. Next we'll take this off right here, 15 millimeter. We'll just take this off. I might have made a mistake. I always recommend keeping the belt on there and breaking loose like water pump bolts here. We got maybe 3 10 millimeter bolts on the water pump pulley. You take those off too. And you can leave the belt on and then actually use the belt tensioner, try and tighten the belt and put some leverage on it and then break those 10 millimeter bolts loose. Otherwise we'll try and pull it with our hands so we can break them loose. And we'll get that pulley off. And then this, which I think is a 19 millimeter. So we'll take this loose, it's a 15 millimeter. Right there, we'll take this off. And we'll take the water pump pulley off, 3 10 millimeter bolts. Should have left the serpentine belt on there because you can use that and leverage it to hold this in place sometimes. But we'll try and hold it with our hands or our large channel locks and break that loose. And then maybe the timing cover. Then maybe the crankshaft pulley there next. I was able to hold it with my left hand and break the 3 bolts loose. So we'll just continue to take those off. Third one is not coming off so easy. Now it is not off, but it is off to the side for now. And we'll see if it comes out later when we jack the engine up or down if we need to do that. So I'm going to take this off since I'm here. And now we'll be using the impact gun. .22 millimeter. Slides right off. Wish everyone was like that. So someone was here before me, took the valve cover and stuff off. Probably just 10 millimeter bolts. Pulling this stuff in place. Coils. Just pull this off to the side, take the hose off. Lots of bolts to hold the cover on. Probably 10 millimeter bolts and nuts. There's a timing chain. You can see the issue is a little bit too much slack. So here's the cover you'll be taking off. And then there's all the bolts. Yeah, looks like 10 millimeter bolts and some nuts. We'll take this cover off. And there's a hose in the front too to take that off. So we have our cover off. There's that hose. And we'll take this. We have the engine is now supported with a jack. Got the jack over there. We're going to take off these bolts here. Looks like 16 or 17. .17 millimeter. .10 millimeter ground wire as well here.
Here though, so you might be able to come up and down.
We will see. It talks about taking the oil pan off, though, I do believe in the directions.
Boom.
And we'll probably take another pulley off, 15 millimeter, the tensioner off as well. We'll just take this off, this pulley off as well, 15 millimeter. Next, we'll just work on taking this off. It's probably got 4 bolts holding it in place. This is a 14 millimeter, I believe. I might have a couple more 14 millimeters, one down below, one on the right side there, and then maybe one 12 millimeter right there, I think. So just start working on getting this off. So when we jacked up the engine, we were able to get the water pump pulley out of there. And then next, we're going to get this tensioner off of here. 15 millimeter bolt there, and then tensioner bolt looks like. Maybe 15 millimeter as well. We're draining the oil because we'll be taking the oil pan off to inspect for chunks and bits and pieces because maybe something broke. And we just want to look in there and see if we can find anything. Alright, so we're getting the tensioner off, and this is actually goes the other way. Guess we're going to call this left-handed screw, meaning it goes the other way, what we expect. Left-handed screw, so we're going clockwise to loosen it. We'll take this off first, and then we can get that other bolt. Although I'm not necessarily sure we need to get the tensioner off there, but we'll see once we get this off. Yes, it seems to be a little bit in the way still, so we got our 17 millimeter, and we're gonna take off this tensioner assembly the rest of the way. This is lefty-loosey, righty-tighty still. Next, we'll be taking off these 2 bolts that go through here because we're going to get this bracket off. 10 and 12 millimeter bolts. So we'll just loosen these up here and get these out. And then we can see about snaking that bracket out of there. Might have to loosen up the other 1 or 2 bolts for the AC just to give us a little wiggle room. We'll see. Let's just get these bolts out. Alright, we got that bracket out, just 4 12 millimeter bolts. Looks like we got some 12-point bolts there. So you'll need some 12-point sockets for those. Otherwise, the rest look like they're 10 millimeter. I'm not necessarily show you how to take the oil pan off. Just lefty-loosey, righty-tighty on all the bolts, and we'll get that down. Let's look at see what size that 12 point is. I bet it's the one I'm missing. Yeah, it's probably a 12 point. So I did try and use a razor blade along the seam. This is all just silicone, and then I used a pry bar right through here and got on the edge of the oil pan and got it pulled down a little bit. Now I got a putty knife wedged in there. Just gonna try and tap it in there a little bit and trying to work that around. You can bend this oil pan without too much trouble, so just be careful with it. You can't really go all out with it. So I'm just going to try and work that around. And I'll try and work it, like I said, around. Get it in there and we'll keep tapping around and see if we can get this oil pan separated. You can kind of see I've got two scrapers wedged in here. I'm able to work along here with my putty knife now. Now just take a hammer to it and keep tapping around as best I can, and we'll get this baby out without damaging the oil pan too much. Pretty well separated. I think we just pull it down. Yep, it's coming pretty good. Whoa, that's more oil in it. So I'm going to put the camera down, pull this off so I don't spill any more oil. Got our oil pan off, and looks like a little baby chain there, probably an oil pump drive. I think we're clear now, and we can just go ahead and start taking the bolts out of here. We got 12mm and 10mm. So just feel free to start taking them all out. Lefty loosey, righty tighty. Also decided about this time, sometime you should line up, can line up top dead center. Little notch I highlighted in white, and then also T is over there for top dead center. On this side is 10. I got that lined up. Take that back off. You can see where the key's at on the side, I think, in the shadow. Get all the bolts out. There are two dowel pins, I believe, on this. There's one right there, and then there's one on the bottom left-hand side down there. And you can see there's a notch actually right there, probably for you to wedge a screwdriver or something in there and try and pry it off. There's also a notch down below on the left side. See if you can see it. There's a notch on this side over here, I see. Then there's the dowel pin on this side over here. You might be able to get back there. So we're going to try and pry this off. May need to spray some penetrant lubricant on those dowel pins. Maybe it'll help work those free. Right back here, there's a spot as well that you can try and get in there and pry. Does seem to be stuck on this one, so I'm going to spray some penetrant on it. We got this kind of pry bar. There's a notch in here. It's able to work it here. I do believe that it's gonna did spray some penetrant on the other dowel pin right there. Just kind of trying to work it back and forth. So just a matter of working back and forth probably and hoping it'll come off. Well, it's gonna come off. I've been gently working it back and forth, and I think it's gonna come off. Whoop, there it is. I think we're gonna have to go up through the top, but it is off and loose. I'm using a block of wood to jack up underneath, and I get some pretty substantial metal down there, so I'm confident I'm not damaging anything, not jacking up on the screen. So we're jacking up, I think, and getting more space. Voila. Got it out. Take a little look at inside here. Offhand, I don't see anything broken. We'll dig a little deeper, I guess. Well, maybe the guide's worn out or something. I'm not sure exactly where this is supposed to go, if this is exactly in the right spot. However, you can see it, but it's grooved. The chain is cut into that metal piece, so that is a problem. So we're going to get in here and replace all these parts, I do believe. So we're just double checking, get this in the right spot, and it says that the key should be lined up with the main bearing cap edge right there, so we're all good. So I stuck a small screwdriver in that hole, pushed up on a little pin in there, and I was able to collapse the piston. You can see it's collapsed and jammed a smaller screwdriver in here, which is what the instructions say. It seems like this should go back farther, but I wasn't able to go back any farther, so hopefully this will hold. But I'll take this out, two 10mm bolts, and more oil will probably come out. It's an oil pressure deal, and you can see better. The damage, that's probably supposed to be an oil drip, and oil is going to drip right down the chain out of this tube, but it looks pretty damaged by the chain. So here's a closer look at the oil feed tube, and it looks pretty much like it got blocked off. So looks like oil's supposed to go through here and come down the dripper, and it didn't, so maybe that is the cause of some kind of premature wear on the chain. Something. So I'd show you closer up. And I used two screwdrivers. I used it to push this down just a little ways, and then I was able to get my second screwdriver in here, because you need to push this down and recess it a little bit, and then I got a small well, it's a old timing belt tensioner pin. We get a bunch of those when we get new tensioners anyway. Probably a small drill bit or a small hex key of some kind will fit. So I got that locked in there, so we can take that other tensioner off. Did make a couple marks here and this is on top dead center, so I want to kind of make some marks. Made a mark down here as well, just for my reference. And there's a little dimple there. I put a little white on the dimple, and there's a knot dimple there too. So You can take the chain off, I think, maybe, or maybe not. We'll see what the instructions say. So we just pulled off the guides, all 10mm bolts, and had enough slack to take the chain off from the bottom. Took it off there. Here's the basic layout, like so. Next we'll remove the 10mm bolt for the timing belt tensioner guide back there. And then you can remove this guide too. It's got 3 10mm bolts in it. I think the steps actually say to remove that back one, then remove the chain, and then remove this one in the front. So 4 more 10mm bolts and 1 chain. Timing marks don't exactly line up on this, although I'm not exactly sure what the marks are yet. So just have the 2 chains hanging. We can check and see which ones, if there's any stretching of metal. So yes, the old one is on the left and the new one is on the right, and you can see it's different. So I got the balance shaft and oil drive stuff, pump assembly back on. I did have to take off. I guess they call this a module. Again, you can use that 12mm, 1, 2, 3, 4. Take those 4 bolts down all the way out, and then you can hold it, unfortunately, and slide that gear off the top. You can slide out a little bit, and then you can mount this onto the chain. Then you can slide it back and mount it up or bolt it up. Looks like 12 foot-pounds, and then 60 degrees, and then 60 degrees again. So if you imagine a circle, of course, you got to go 60 degrees. So 12 foot-pounds for each one, and 60 degrees around, and then 60 degrees a second time for those bolts. Then we can move to putting the chain on. Oh, we'll put the guides on as well, and the tensioner. So we've got the guide installed and put the chain on. We did have to rotate the camshafts up here. If you can see that right here, there's a small dot and a colored link. Same with the back here. If you can see that, there's a colored link and a dot. Down here, we're close, but it's slipped off a little bit. There's the dot and the colored link. So we're going to rotate the cams back to the right just a little bit and let that link drop right on the dot where it needs to be. So they're all on. This one's jumping around a little bit because this one wants to move on me. So it's kind of tricky. Maybe try and put have an assistant help you hold this in place so you can put the left timing chain guide on and the tensioner assembly. So letting go. So far so good. So if we don't disturb anything, then we can put this together. So I'm going to go down here and I will put on the left side guide.
Yeah, not so much cut this scrap crap. Yeah, it doesn't make scrapping cheaper, huh? Yeah. But I would take some stuff like extruded aluminum stuff, and like that screws in it, and it's like this, and roll it, and put the frame and stuff, so it's always flat straight.
Now watch as Todd installs the bolt of the guide for the timing chain.
Yeah.
Remember, in most cases, tightening the bolt is always righty for tighty.
Yeah. All right. Got the bolt started on that. As you can see, also got a bolt started here. I'm going to put this one in here, swing it over. What's that?
Trying to turn the eyes on apart.
Yeah, sorry. All right, got everything started. I'm gonna go double check my timing marks. What's that?
You're really gonna try to take one for the team there.
The original white marks lined up. And this is lined up with the edge here. Timing mark is lined up with the dot. And then we'll go up above. See the front one's lined up. You can see the front one is lined up on there. There's the back one. You can see the back one is lined up there as well. So I feel pretty good about this whole setup right here. This is pretty common too. You'll see I think this is a pretty good sign too. You see these pointing to each other. I think that's usually a pretty good sign. So we're ready to tighten up the bolts. It's only about 9 foot-pounds, I think, for the timing chain guide items and the pressure and the tensioner. All those 10mm bolts are about 9 foot-pounds. Go ahead and tighten those up. Then we can probably pull the pin on the tensioner. Once all our guides are tightened up, we can pull the pin on the tensioner. All right, just got done tightening my bolts. They're all 10mm. I'm gonna pull the pin. Boom. Pull the pin. You see I put some grease also on the guides. It'll be kind of a dry startup, so we got grease on there. You can see my link is pretty good alignment on the dot there as well. So I feel good about this overall. Make sure this is nice and clean. We'll be sealing this with RTV silicone. So we'll make sure it's all clean. Got a little grease on that one, so I'm gonna clean this all off. And we can think about mounting this. I need to put in, I'm waiting for my piece right here. This was worn out, worn through, so I'm gonna wait for that piece and then we can put it together. It's pretty much reverse procedure to install. Like I said, just using the silicone to seal up the oil pan and the timing cover. Recommend a new seal in the timing cover as well. gonna try and get one decent shot of the timing belt routing. Maybe make a drawing of it before you take it apart. The crankshaft pulley is what, 130, 140 foot-pounds, something like that.